join us to really reflect why this bill is so important. And I want to thank you all for coming, and thank you all for putting your shoulder to the wheel, not just over the last 2 years since we've been trying to progress this bill, but actually the last 15 years since you've been fighting to really get justice back in terms of the retired workers' pensions that were robbed and interfered with and stolen and messed about with without any say to the individuals involved, or the collective indeed involved at the time. And that's what this bill is trying to redress, that basic injustice that means that retired workers do not have a say over what happens to their pension once they're retired, and that pension fund can be used in very many ways to the detriment of retired workers. And the evidence will be given here today by the good people that are joining me at the top table. First thing to say is apologies from Sue Shaw, who's been doing a great job coordinating this campaign as the CEO of the Irish Senior Citizens Parliament. Her assistant Niamh, who's here, Niamh is sitting at the front, has been doing great work with Nick, who's at the back. Nick works for our media operation, People for Profit media operation inside Dáil Éireann. And Devon is here with us doing the social media. And I want to thank Newstalk for coming. And I believe you took an interview with Sue last night, and it was going to be broadcast on the news today around Newstalk, which is very good because you do have a wide audience that'll hear this stuff. So I don't want to talk too long. My name is Breed Smith, just for the formalities. I'm TD with People Before Profit, and we put this bill before the Dáil in 2020, wasn't it, Owen? 2021. So we're just going on 2 years now since we put this bill, and I think it's June 2021, was it? So just going on 2 years since we put this bill before the Dáil, and it has progressed to the point that we had a scrutiny of the bill in the committee, but now it's stalled. It's come to a brick wall where the government don't want it to progress. They have problems with it. People here again will talk about that. We very much want it to progress, and we think it's a matter of basic justice that it should progress, and that's why we're here today to try and promote that, and hopefully more members of the media will take it up. The bill is about equality and giving retired workers a voice over their pension schemes to which they have contributed throughout their working lives, and the bill will ensure that retired workers are considered whenever changes are proposed to existing pension schemes. This should be supported not just by retired workers but by all workers, because we're all going to get there, and hopefully sooner or later we'll all live long enough to retire, and all workers should be concerned, and all unions should be concerned about this and the justice and equality issues that it pertains to. So I'm going to let the others speak. And who wants to go first? Do you want to go first, Eileen?
Okay.
Yeah, Eileen's travelled a good bit this morning, so I'll let you go first.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming here. As Breach said, we're supporting this retired workers bill because I'm with the Retired Aviation Staff Association, and we represent former employees with Dublin Airport Authority and Aer Lingus, the aviation sector. And what has been happening to us from the last 15 years is that we have been excluded from all industrial negotiations where changes were taking place to our pensions, and actually our pensions and payment. At this point in time, we have actually up to 22.53% deducted from our monthly income. It started, first of all, with the pension levy, the stamp duty, and before that, cost of living. Since 2007, there's been no cost of living increases. Then it followed on from the pension levy, and then there was a pension authority minimum funding standard deductions unilaterally imposed upon us. That was all part of an industrial relations negotiations. Our association actually wrote to the Labour Court, wrote to the employers, wrote to the trade unions, the government, trustees, everybody to have a voice at the table, to be sitting around. But in actual fact, we weren't allowed. The Labour Court said, okay, yeah, we're having negotiations, technical committees, etc., etc. Legal advisors, actuaries looking at all of this. but you're not a stakeholder. The government's expert panel said we're not a stakeholder in our pension. We were contributing for up to 45 years for a future of a pension promise, which was actually fixed at our date of retirement. Imagine you having an annuity, which we were told we had for life, and then 20 years later, oh no, that's no longer an annuity. The government can just come in and take it all over. And it was all under the guise of a metric under minimum funding standards. So we knew, and the other groups, members of the committee were able to vote. The employers voted on it, the government voted on it, everybody voted on it, and we were actually part of the menu, and we were just deducted up to 22.53%. So far since January 2015, they've taken out of our monthly income up to 50 million that we would have had to spend in the economy, and that is ongoing every single month. And we're told it's nothing to do with you. It can happen tomorrow as well, and it can happen technically. There's nothing in legislation that can stop this happening to us tomorrow or to any of you tomorrow without your say, if you're in a situation of being in a pension fund, an occupational pension fund. And the other interesting thing from our scheme, similar to everybody else around the table, is we're a multi-employer cross-border scheme. We had pensionable service in the UK and in Europe. They were not allowed under social and labour law in Europe to deduct any of these things. Even the pension levy isn't deducted, and even cost of living is being paid. So, and even in the USA, you know, they're all protected as well. There's rescue plans there that for people in multi-employer occupational pension scheme. So we are unique, but it's in Irish legislation. So again, we need a voice at the table, and the government and the officials are saying, no, you have, you know, we don't want to give you any rights. You have too many rights, and they're fearful of us having a voice at the table.
Okay,
So
that's excellent. Eileen, thanks so much. That's a great opening. And our next contributor is John Nugent, who's sitting here to my left. I'll let John introduce himself.
Okay, thanks very much, Breed. As Breed has stated there, my name is John Nugent. I'm currently Vice Chairman of the National Federation of Pensioners Associations. And I believe that I'm well placed to speak out on the support to support this bill put forward by Breed on the rights of retired workers. I was a former director of the ESB, a permanent member of the ESB Joint Industrial Council, which dealt with industrial relations issues, including pensions. And I was also president of the ESB Officers Association, which was the biggest trade union in the ESB during my term of office. And these experiences have given me, I think, valuable insights into pensions from both the corporate and trade union procedures perspective, from which I can only conclude that the provisions of the bill before the Dáil is long overdue and has the full support of the ISCP, of course, NFPA, Age Action Ireland, and all the affiliates representing hundreds of thousands of pensioners, many of whom are experiencing pension poverty for the first time. And I'll talk about pension poverty in a few minutes. And there are three stakeholders essentially in pension schemes. There is the pension provider, there are the pensioners and the contributing members to the scheme, including those, and of course the trade unions. Now, pensioners are excluded from the table when trade union and pension providers negotiate on the pensions issues, not only on IR procedures, but also on the governance of schemes. And the trade unions and the pension providers are going to look after their own interests. The pensioners' representatives are not, as I said, allowed at the table, and they have no voice whatsoever in what comes out of these negotiations. They're not balloted upon, and this has caused the pension poverty, in my view, because many pensioners have had pension levies imposed on them over the last 10 years, and many pensioners have had pension freezes over 10, 12, 13 years. And there are many low-paid pensioners in the country at the moment suffering poverty from the fact that they essentially their representatives are not allowed to have any procedures whatsoever in relation to the disputes they might have with the pension providers. The government talk very much about the fact that pensioners have rights in terms of that they can bring cases to the Pensions Authority or indeed to the Financial and Services Ombudsman. And believe you me, pensioners have been there to no avail. It doesn't come under the remit of the Pensions Authority whatsoever to have anything to do with the procedures, the IR procedures for pensioners. Absolutely nothing to do with it. The Financial and Services Ombudsman will deal with individual cases. And if you want to appeal, for instance, a decision by the Financial and Services Ombudsman, you'd have to go to the High Court. Now, given the poverty that surrounds many pensioners, they are not in a position to engage high-powered lawyers, as companies are, as the government are, to go through these type of procedures. So what we are looking for, and Breed has very kindly sponsored the bill, and I would like to thank her very sincerely. She was the only politician who actually took this on, and as far as we're all concerned, done a great job in pursuing this and giving so much time to it, as indeed Sue was not here from the ISCP. We are looking essentially to go to the WRC to have the same rights as contributing members of pension schemes who are members of the same superannuation scheme. For instance, once you retire, if you want to go on the basis of equality and you go to the Equality Tribunal, you will find that after 6 months you have absolutely no rights whatsoever. You cannot take a case after 6 months. So why can you have rights for 6 months as a pensioner, and after 6 months your rights are taken away? If you want to go, which I have done, to the Labour Court, WRC, as it is at the moment, they will not deal with substantive issues from pensioners. They will only uphold what the law states, that is, you have no rights after 6 months. So essentially, pensioners have no place to go, absolutely no place to go, even though pensioners' cohort can be the majority of pensioners in a pension scheme. So on the one hand, you have pensioners who are members of trade unions who can go in and negotiate with the pension provider. They can use conciliation services and they get arbitration. On the other side of the coin, pensioners have absolutely no rights whatsoever, and they're not even consulted in many instances on the results of these negotiations between the trade unions and the pension providers. And this is a very cosy arrangement for both the trade unions and the pension providers. And it's all about power, that they can exercise this power over pensioners. Now, we have to position after 10 years, I think this really started around 2008 at the time of the banking crisis, that we've had this going on for years, and there are many pensioners who I am aware of, for instance, who have less than 13,000 social welfare rates. And with the economy the way it is in terms of CPI, cost of living, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, they are suffering severe poverty. So what we want the government to do is to give rights to pensioners to have procedures so that even if it's necessary, arbitration, where they can look at the individual cases from pensioners' organisations. And above all, we want to be at the table when negotiations are taking place between trade unions and the pension providers.
Well said. Thanks very much, John. And the final speaker from here, and then we'll open it up for questions, is Jerry Foley, and you can introduce yourself, Jerry, in the background.
Okay, my name is Jerry Foley, and I'm chairman of the Retired Public Servants. I represent 150,000 members. And just before I get involved in some of this, I want to actually thank Breach, because our organisation were the first people that went around all the TDs in the Dáil on the different parties a number of years ago, since 2014, and we've asked, so we had, that something could be done regarding pensions, and I'll come back into our own organisation in a second. And the only one that actually came up was Breach, and I'd like to thank her for the fact that she brought in the bill. And the bill, while as it is, it can be amended, and hopefully I will be raising a question with the Minister today, because I went through the document last night and I found that Damon English indicated he's prepared to work with ourselves way back when he met them last year, but we have no answer from that yet. I just want to come in and say the following. Anyone in the civil service have no rights at all, because under the 1990 Act we're not deemed to be a worker, so we have nowhere to go in the time you leave. So just to make it quite clear, we don't have anywhere to go. We can't go to any of these things that everyone else is talking about, and we believe that the government is in breach of the European courts under the basis of that. And I do have legal opinion, and I do say that we will be taking them on if they don't change it. Coming into the fact that we are dealing with 150,000 members. Under the 1990 Act, when it was brought in 2019, or 2000, whatever the date was, we were not actually covered at all in it, at all. Under no circumstances, we can go to nobody. So anyone in this room, like that's it, retired public servants, can go nowhere, because we've nowhere to go. Because we're not allowed under the Act, because we're not deemed to be a worker under the 1990 Act. And I believe that the government is in breach of European law, and that I've already said that at the last meeting we had when we met the other people relating to the committee that's dealing with it. I cannot see for the life of me why the government cannot support the bill on the basis of even doing amendments to the bill. I mean, there's nothing wrong in doing an amendment once you bring it in, but that everyone is covered. The other thing too is that when we actually dealt with the 1990 Act, we also discovered as well is that because all of us are retirees and we have nowhere to go, I've said that already, but we believe there's an anomaly there, because insofar as public servants are concerned, they can go nowhere. They have nowhere to go at all, because they're not covered under the Act. The other point I would like to say as well is that our members of 150,000 members, and we have the biggest organisation in the group of 150,000 retirees. Every one of the people in that is actually in the same category as myself or anyone else, and Mick and all of those people here as well. So it's wrong, and I believe that the government in some format should support the bill in some form, in some way that actually will allow public servants to have a right to go somewhere. I'm not saying where it is, because I don't want to get involved in that, but there should be somewhere that they can go, because they're not covered under the Act, and I believe that there's a desperate anomaly there in that, and I believe also that they're in breach of European law. The government is, and they haven't come back on that and that as well. I also looked at a document last night where last year when you met Damon English, some people, he indicated that he was interested in helping. Well, I haven't seen any help so far, and I'm interested to see what the new minister has to say today, and I'm looking forward to raising questions, serious questions with him, because if there's anything wrong with the bill, they can actually do an amendment to it, or they can ask Bree to do an amendment. But if you actually destroy the bill, then you have nowhere, and we're back to where we are, square one. And I could go on with this all the time, but my point is to here is, remember this, that when you are dealing with public servants, We have no rights at all, even going anywhere in the Labour Court that John talked about. None whatsoever. And it's a breach of law. And I do have a legal degree as well, and I believe that my legal degree will pass in the European courts. So we're asking you to support the bill. We're asking you to support Breach, and I think as well that Breach, if you can get an amendment to it, there's nothing wrong in having amendments to the bill, providing the bill is not actually scuffled in such a way that it doesn't appear. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Jerry, and thanks to all the speakers here. I'm retired, not expired. That's a beautiful T-shirt. Where'd you get it? You got it made. Oh, lovely. You'll have to wear that today outside the Dáil. Yeah, very good. And that is a point worth noting for journalists who are present. They have a great slogan: retired workers are not retired voters. And with over 500,000 represented by what this bill would do, plus probably more because of their families and their spouses and partners who would be concerned about it, that's quite a strong voice. And we just have to get that across, because as much and all as the department are willing to meet us today, they would also love to scupper this. So we have to keep going, unfortunately, and see what happens today. But we'll give it our best shot, and then we'll regroup after today and see what the committee do, and we'll make further decisions, because it's quite a powerful voice in Irish society. And thank you all for coming in. Are there any questions or further points that anyone would like to make? I'd ask Newstalk first. Do you want to ask anyone any questions?
Questions until I have the mic on. I might grab you one-to-one each after.
One-to-one afterwards, okay. And then we're going outside the Dáil if anyone wants to take photographs for a wee bit of a lobby protest. And we've written to all TDs and senators and asked them to come out and to support us and to give the recognition of what's happening today. Anyone else want to make a contribution or ask a question?
Just to the point of information, the document that was circulated by the government is flawed completely, so it can be taken on as well. The document that was circulated recently, it's not right, and it's illegal, some of it.
Right.
If I could make a comment politically, I mean, the ISCP have canvassed nearly all political parties, and ISCP members around the country and the various affiliates have also canvassed the politicians. One of the interesting things about it, the first stage of the bill from Breed got unanimous support, I would think, from the opposition parties. And in our canvass of the government parties and their politicians, they were very sympathetic to the plight of pensioners. And we don't know what position they're going to take. The issue is with the Joint Committee of the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment at the moment. But on the ground, the government parties have promised support to the pensioners, and it will be interesting to see if they fulfil those promises that they have made on the canvas to the pensioners.
In local constituencies, yeah. So we need to keep that pressure on them locally as well.
But we're getting the impression that if there was a vote, they wouldn't be following through on that. That's the impression we're picking up. But hopefully, we're trying to make sure that we do have a voice at the table. The High Court, in our case, actually reinforced the fact that our cuts to our pension was an industrial relations process. They said it was highly coordinated, highly resourced, and chronologically excluded us from everything, and we had no voice. And that's a judgment in the courts. So, but at the same time, the industrial relations decision that was signed by the employers and the trustees actually signed away up to 22.53% out of our monthly income without telling us. It's like somebody taking your income and salary today and saying, okay, this union group or whatever, we're going to cut you by 22 unilaterally. You've absolutely no say.
It's a big proportion of your income.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you know, and they're saying the only relationship we have in under the trust schemes of the occupational schemes, funded schemes, is with the trustee. But the trustee needs the employers, and the employers have a veto over everything. They sign everything. If you wanted a rule change tomorrow, and the trustees and the members decided on it, the employers could say no, say a veto, and in turn the government have a veto because it went straight back up to the ministers.
Right.
So, the situation has changed. They're not recognising the situation, and this country has changed as a result of the legislation they brought in 2013. So, I think that this bill is highly desired, and it is necessary in this day and age, in the 21st century, to give us our rights.
And
Thanks very much.
sorry, Brid, if I can just say, you should be aware that the government have had a consultancy arrangement whereby they've taken submissions from all the stakeholders and from any other organisations. And if you look at the submissions made by, for instance, ICTU, are in support of the pensioners in this particular case. And the only opposition in the consultancy process came from IBEC. And I think that would naturally follow because IBEC are more interested in a race to the bottom with regard to pensions issues for people. So this bill has tremendous support, and it will be certainly gut-wrenching if the government decide to oppose it in some form or another, given that many of their TDs have expressed support for the bill.
I mean, there is another scenario where they might just try and block it and not put it to a vote, but hold it in kind of in the refrigerator, like they've done to every other progressive bill that we've put before the Dáil. We've a bill since 2018 on climate change that we had to go to the High Court and all to try and get them to release it, and we're still in a limbo with it. So there's that possibility, but that doesn't mean that we won't stop trying to push them to do something, to let it go forward, and when the report comes back to the committee, to try and push a vote on that, because that means that every TD in the Dáil will have to stand up and be accountable for what they're doing if they are prepared to scupper it. So it's very important. Owen, do you want to add anything to the whole scenario?
Why are they so much afraid of the pensioners having the vote?
I think I can give an answer to that, Bobby. It's a power game, essentially, and it all started back in 2008 with the banking crisis, where the trade unions previously, when they did negotiations on pensions, didn't interfere with the benefits of pensioners. But what happened was then that the trade unions, under threat with their members at the time, did a deal with a lot of the pension providers to the exclusion of the Pensioners Association, who, as I said, had no voice whatsoever. I have corporate experience of the SB. Why they did it was that they wanted to protect their credit rating at the time, which had gone through the floor because the sovereign fees had gone through the floor as well. So it was the pensioners who suffered and have been carrying this burden now for well over 12, 13, 14 years. And it's all about power. The power rests between the negotiations at the moment between the trade unions and the pension providers. The pensioners are an afterthought. And when they talk about consultation, I know from my own experience, consultation means a phone call from the pension provider to say, we've done a deal with the trade unions, and that's it.
Just to support what John is saying on that, the biggest thing we hear a lot, the phrase we hear a lot is, it will create industrial disharmony. In other words, we were protected under law up to about 2013. Therefore, it wasn't on people's agenda that if your pension in retirement is being attacked, you're on a pension, in our scheme the average age was 72 years of age, you're now 80 who have now been deducted. And all of a sudden at 72 you've been getting your income in 65 and all of a sudden it's disappeared and or a big chunk taken away. The other thing they often say is it's going to put the WRC in an untenable position. The reality during our negotiations is the WRC were already negotiating on pensions. And they handled it. They knew what was happening on the pensioners, but we were not being told about it. We've been getting it in the grapevine. We looked for meetings and we weren't allowed. But they were able to. I used the phrase down in the Dáil on the 25th of January at the Oireachtas Committee. We were on the table, we were on the menu, but we were not at the table. So we were just eaten alive, to put it mildly.
You want to answer?
Yeah, just on our side from the public servants, just to say that under the 1990 Act, we're not deemed to be a worker when you leave, when you retire, so you've nowhere to go. And we still have nowhere to go. And it's all wrong, and it needs to be addressed. I just want to make that quite clear. We have nowhere to go. So if we're not deemed to be a worker under the Act, the 1990 Act.
Owen, did you want to come in?
I just answer the question the chap asked there. I think the reason why there's opposition from the government and others is because it suits them. It suits them not to have retired workers at the table, because they quite like the idea that they can introduce these changes in the future without recourse to negotiate or consult with retired workers. We know what happened in 2008. That can happen again. So that suits them, and I think unfortunately it not just suits the government and employers, it suits some elements of the trade union movement not to have a voice for retired workers, and we think we have to call that out to some extent. But more importantly, I think is what's happened since the bill came in. The government have had 2 years to introduce some alternative, to make some contribution to it. They had a consultation process that lasted a year. They've now had almost another year, and they've done nothing. And they've only announced recently their absolute opposition to this thing. And most of the arguments they've made, as John Withers and Eileen have said, are completely fake and spurious arguments against the bill. So it doesn't stand up any logical. It's an injustice that should be addressed, and the government have had 2 years to address it. It suits them not to address it. But there's another interesting thing about this, which is they haven't actually explicitly until now said, no, go to hell.
No.
And I think that's because they're afraid of the people in this room. They're afraid of the 500,000 votes that are out there, and they're afraid of the associations lobbying on this and making it an issue. So I think that we should be intimidated by the fact that they've said no so far, because it's a minority of people who are saying no. It's senior civil servants, it's government ministers. It doesn't represent what most people see as a clear injustice that can be rectified in law. So therefore, the more lobbying we do and the more pressure we put on them, I think they are vulnerable in this. You don't want to say no to you people. They're afraid of you. And I think the job now in the next month or two is to make sure that they have a right to be afraid of you.
Very good, Owen. Is that okay with everyone? So the plan now for the rest of the day is we've a meeting at 2 o'clock with the junior minister recently appointed. He's replaced the other fellow, Damien English. Neil Richmond is his name, Fine Gael junior minister. So there's a delegation of us going to meet him, but in the interim we're going to go outside the Dáil and have a protest due to start at 12:30. Now it's only 20 to 12 now, so I have written to, like I said, TDs and senators and asked them to come out to the gate to support you, to say hello and to show that they recognise the importance of what you're doing and the bill and all that. So there's no point in us really going to the gate before, say, 12:15. We could go there it'll be about half an hour's time. So if people want to have a tea and a coffee here or something, please feel free. We can look after paying for it if you just say you're with Breed Smith and get yourself a tea and a coffee and a scone or something. And then if there's the media want to talk to any of the people here, please feel free. Nick, you want to say something?
Just to say, if the top table would